Hello, family. It's the Old School Traveler. I'm back again. I just came off a trip to Chicago. Now, I'm kind of biased towards Chicago because I like Chicago a lot. I do like it a lot. And I went to the Obama Museum, the Aquarium, the museum, the Art Institute of Chicago. I went everywhere, all over the place. And boy, did I enjoy myself. You know, I went to the Sky Deck where you on the 103rd floor of this Sears Tower, but now they call it the Willis Tower. But Chicago, the one thing about Chicago I can say, it's got one of the prettiest skylines in the world. And I done been to Kuala Lumpur, Hong Kong, Singapore. I done been to all those places. And Chicago, I think because they designed it after most of the city got burnt down by Miss Olsen cow, or that's the fable they tell anyway. But I do like Chicago a lot because there's a lot of things to do. And so I'm kind of partial to big cities. But if you look at my videos, I go to small cities too. But I like Chicago because it's just a very vibrant city. And like New York and LA and Philadelphia and some of these other cities, there's always something going on. And I just like that when there's always something going on. But if you go to Chicago, now Chicago is a city that where I stay and where I go, you know, like the Navy Pier and other places, I don't see a lot of the crime they talk about. But don't get me wrong. Every city got a south side. And I know the crime is there because when I drove through it, it looks totally different than when you're driving through the other parts of Chicago, like downtown or the Magnificent Mile. Yeah, all of Chicago ain't like that. No. But the suburbs are interesting because even though those suburbs are old, they look kind of modern. They've been around for a while, but they look very, very modern. Now, when I say that, Chicago can be expensive. Actually, it is expensive. I stayed in a hotel, the Embassy Suites on the Magnificent Mile, and I spent a lot of money. I'm talking like $400 a night. And it was just not worth the money in my book because in the summertime in most big cities and schools out, you pay a lot of money for really nothing. Yeah, it was just really nothing as far as the hotel goes. But all the attractions are very, very reasonable and they're pretty cheap. And I got to go to some attractions and you're going to see it. You're going to see it on this video. If you look at the video, you can see the attractions that I went to that I really, really enjoyed. And it can suck up a whole day without you knowing it. You know, like I like the river cruises. I like those because you really get a good feel for Chicago and the tall buildings that they have there. And you get a feel for everything. And boy, do I love the food. Now, let me tell you something though. Chicago is a very diverse city. But boy, they got a lot of Indians. And I don't mean the Wahoo or the Lone Ranger type Indians. I'm talking about the Indians that think they're Asians. You know, the ones say, I'm Asian. No. Only you feel you are. You look more African and Middle Eastern than anything else in the world. But they got a shitload of them. Yeah, they're there. But, you know, you can tell they're there because I saw more Indian restaurants than I seen last year when I went and the year before when I went. I try to go to Chicago every year to enjoy myself. And I realized that I got to go at certain times of the year because if not, it's either too cold, too windy off the lake, or it's just too humid. But this time I went, it was perfect weather every single day. And they had some parades and things I like. And I just like going to Chicago because the people, they're not mean, but they're not like in the South. They're not overly friendly either. Now, saying that, Chicago got crime. You look at the news, you think that's all they got. No, they got good food. They got good places to go to. They got things to keep you busy. And when I say good food, I always get Persian food. Persian food. You know, they got some people from Iran or wherever they come from, but they got some of the best Persian food in the world outside of LA. Now, let me get it straight. LA got a whole lot more Persian food than Chicago do. Well, probably because they got half the people in Iran is in LA. Yeah, half of them are in LA. But saying that, I like the food trucks too. But I didn't see as many this time as I normally do. But I didn't go also when they had these huge festivals either. I tried to dial it back a little bit where they had more neighborhood things. And I had Chicago hot dog. Now, let me tell you something that really got me upset. I went with some friends and family. They wanted thin crust pizza in Chicago. That told me that they did no homework on Chicago, because Chicago don't have thin crust pizza. Now, I did find a couple of steakhouses that I really, really liked a lot. Chicago is, they're famous for these steaks, but it's not worth the money. It's overpriced. Yeah, it's not worth the money. And downtown Chicago is very, very clean. And to be honest about it, when I went to some of the places on the south side, they were not dirty this time like they were last time. They were pretty much clean. It's almost like the trash man came the day before I got there, or maybe the day I got there. I don't know. Now, saying that, they got toll roads everywhere. You are going to pay for toll roads in Chicago whether you want to or not. You can't go nowhere without hitting a toll road, because that is a city of interstates. They got interstates everywhere because they are going to get that money. And traffic is horrendous. I don't care where you go, what time you go, who you go with, who tells you. Traffic is horrendous. And the only time I seen traffic that was very, very light was when I was going to Indiana. And traffic wasn't that light going to Indiana because it goes down to 2 lanes. Chicago should be a city that every single damn interstate should be at least 5 lanes each way. Each way. But that's just Chicago and them making money off you. Now, saying that, restaurants in Chicago, it looked like the prices went down a little bit since I went last year to the same places. Now, I always throw in new places and places I've never been to before, because my whole goal is to travel, eat, and get experiences. That's all I do. I'm not into that. I'm on a budget. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't like pissing on money. No. I don't like doing that. I don't like doing that either. But I also know that some places, you don't know when you're going to come back. And you like to see growth. Now, it's hard to go to Chicago and not go to Gary, Indiana. That's a dump. That is a city that they should just, I gotta say it, just throw a bomb in there and just nuke everything, and no one would miss it. If Gary, Indiana disappeared off the map, nobody would miss it. Nobody, not even the people in Gary. But now, back to Chicago. I think Chicago do one of the better jobs of giving you activities and giving you things to do. Now, one place I went to quite a bit, and I do like it, is the Navy Pier. Now, you got all these restaurants, you got a Ferris wheel, you got a whole lot of stuff, and at the Navy Pier. It's kind of almost like a carnival type. It's very carny. Everything is fried. They got a lot of restaurants, and everything is fried. The only place that everything is not fried is a couple of bigger restaurants. Matter of fact, yeah, that's a lot too. Everything is fried. Yeah, everything is fried. It's just what it is. Now, let's get down to it. Can you make it in Chicago if you start with 0? Yes, you can. Now, you won't make it in the places that I go to. No, you won't. But if you go to the South Side and some of those other places, sure, you can make it, because they have a lot of small pop and mom chain restaurants, like some of the chicken shacks and the fried fish shacks. They have those all over Chicago. And so you can make it if you start with 0. It may take you a little bit time to make it, but you can make it though. Unlike some cities, unless you are connected to what drives that city, you can't make it. In Chicago, you can make it, and they got some of the best universities in the world. In the world, in Chicago, and most of them are large. They're very, very large. But Chicago itself got like 2.7 million people. They got a lot. And there are days where you see every single one of them. And those are days that everything stops and slows down or pisses you off. Yeah, they had that too. Now, when I was talking about diversity, you got almost every race in the world in Chicago. That's the beauty of it. Because when you got a diverse economy, a diverse population, you got diversity in food. And that's what I go there for. But also, I seen people at places that was interesting, and it's kind of cool that you got some of the Japanese, some of the Chinese, some of the other people. They all about the museums and some of the monuments and some of the other things. And that's cool because I know they got to eat somewhere when they finish, because Chicago is a very walkable city. It's very wheelchair city, or what you call it, disability or whatever. But you can get around Chicago though. And Uber is not that expensive because almost everything of value, everything you want to see is somewhere on that lake, which is cool. It's somewhere on that lake. Now, you do got other things in the city, not on the lake, but those aren't the major attractions. All your major attractions are really on that lake. Even if you get the hop on, hop off bus, it just rides along the lake. So that tells you where everything's at. Now, one place I went to that I have never been to before in Chicago, that's the aquarium. It's a very, very nice aquarium. It's very, very nice. And they had all the fish or fishes, however you want to say it, but everything they had came out of the Great Lake, except for the whale. But some things you see, you be like, damn, if I go fishing here, I might get a body, or I might get a whale, or I might get a big fish. But you're going to get something, because the aquarium says it's loaded with everything. So that's one of the things about Chicago I do like. And I did not get a chance to go to the zoo, the Lincoln Zoo, but I will next time, because that was on my hit list. But there were so many other things to do, I didn't get around to it. So I don't have pictures of that, but I got pictures of everything else. It's just a matter of do you want to, what do you want to do and how long are you going to be there? And I was there for 9 days, and I stayed busy every single day for 9 days. And I know I could have did other things if I would have just spent less time in the places I care about, but I wasn't going to do that, because I go there every year, and every year I try and look at different things and see different things. So now let's get down to the people in Chicago, as far as they take a lot of pride in their sports teams and in their city. They take a lot of pride. Whether you like the White Sox, the Cubs, the Bears, Chicago loves them all. Now, do they love them all equally? Hell no. Because the South Side like the Cubs, the North Side like the White Sox. It's totally different. And you'll see the Chicago Bears Stadium that's fairly old. It's very, very old. Now, they're talking about building a new stadium in Hammond, Indiana, which is like the neighboring city on the border with Indiana. There ain't shit in Indiana. There ain't nothing at all in Indiana. You can just, I went there a couple of times, and it was a waste of gas. But as far as Chicago compared to other major cities like LA and New York, it's on the same par. It's on the same par. And like I said, the skyline looks better than New York's. Now, New York may have taller buildings or more taller buildings. Chicago got quite a few. They got a lot. They got probably the second most tall buildings over 40 stories in the United States. But no matter how you enter Chicago, you see that skyline, and it just takes your breath away. It is just great when you see it. And then you can drive along Lakeshore Drive, and you see every single tall building that you want to see. And you can, it's one of those cities that, like New York, you will break your neck because you're looking up all the damn time. You're going to be looking up all the time saying, wow, wow, wow. But also, the one thing about Chicago that I didn't see a lot of in the city was schools. Now, I know they go to school somewhere, because I met some people who were not stupid. So I'm like, they went to school somewhere. But you don't see a lot of schools, where in LA, there are schools everywhere. I'm talking about elementary schools, high schools, middle schools. They're everywhere. Chicago, you don't see that, but I know they got them somewhere there. But, I didn't see a lot myself, but I was looking for them. But if you're going to spend money, and now I don't know how a budget traveler would live without spending a lot of money on Uber or a rent-a-car. in Chicago or get around. If you're a visitor, I just Ubered. Because everything was $15, $20. Because like I said, everything from where I was staying at, my hotel was in the middle of every single thing. And in Chicago, they got a lot of attractions. Millennium Park is overrated. Now they got an amphitheater and they got the Bean. That's all they got. But people go there thinking that it's got all these attractions. No, it just got two good ones. That's all it got, two good ones. And the videos show the two good ones. That's Millennium Park. But you also got a lot of other parks in Chicago. And they're all walkable unless you're fat. If you're fat, no matter where you go, you just can't walk. They're all wheelchair friendly. So, yeah, fat people on a wheelchair, you'll be all right. And then you can go to the food trucks and get hot dogs or whatever. Well, you're not eating anything healthy. And Chicago don't serve a lot of healthy stuff, no way, even though it's in the Midwest. But they do like their meat and potatoes. Yeah, they like their meat and potatoes. Chicago is that kind of city, which I got no problem with, but I do like a salad, though, because I don't want my body just beating myself up. Now, saying that, if I was in Chicago, they got a lot of, I guess cheaper shopping out in the suburbs, and I really like the suburbs. The streets are nice, the streets are flat, and Chicago is flat itself. The Midwest is flat. It is what it is until you get to Denver, and then of course Denver got the mountains and everything else. But Chicago's pretty flat, so it's not bad on your body as far as walking 8 or 9 miles a day. Walking around downtown, walking the parks, I really enjoy that. And like I said, you got all kind of things to do. And Chicago likes their fireworks too. They like their fireworks. It reminds me of Hong Kong a little bit. Because at night at the Navy Pier, not every night, but every Wednesday and Saturday, they had fireworks. And they were and the people were reasonable as far as their attitudes, no problems, no crime, no nothing in that area. Now, I know someone's getting shot down the street, but I wasn't down the street. So that's their problem. Now, Chicago, one thing about Chicago that was a little bit different for me, they got a lot of parking, but the parking is expensive as hell. They're almost on the par with Boston, which parking fees downtown are ridiculous. The parking fees in Boston are higher than New York, and you're not going to see all the stuff you can see in New York. It ain't like that. If I see more, I don't mind paying more. But if I'm not going to see more, I don't want to pay more. But Chicago, parking is a pretty penny. And out of all the big cities I've been to, LA is the cheapest on parking. But Chicago, though, like I said, I like it because even when it's 85 degrees, that breeze off the Lake Michigan, man, it keeps you cool. It keeps you nice and cool. And that's kind of fun watching that. Now, I'm going to drop another video. It's going to be a music video, and I'm going to put it on my other channel. And it's just going to be touring Chicago with no words, just music. Because, and that's going to be a nice video. But that's kind of cool because Chicago is a place that if you were going to go to one of the biggest, just say the top 5 cities in America, Chicago should be on your list. It should be on your list. And like I said, we ate so much different foods in Chicago, but most of the immigrant population living in the north part of Chicago, I ain't say live. That's where the restaurants are. They're in the north part of Chicago, going toward Milwaukee. So we did enjoy that. The south side got your Hispanics and your blacks. So you already know you got problems. You already know you got problems. It is what it is. And I just tell you the truth so you don't go there thinking that, wow, there's nobody, everybody's brown. No, they're brown and black. And so you know you got problems. And the thing too, that where I stayed at, I never heard a siren the whole time. But construction on the interstates got to get better and got to get done quicker. I'm talking about I've been going there for the last 4 years, and they've been working on the same part of the road for the last 4 years. That's called a retirement job if I'm going to work on the same quarter mile for the next 25 years. And that's kind of what it felt like. And O'Hare, the airport, for as big as it is, it's not that bad to navigate. It's nothing like Atlanta, nothing like JFK, you know. But at the same time, your ass got to walk a little bit too. But I don't mind that, you know. I'm not a big fan. I mean, people complain about walking, how far they got to go in the airport. If you do exercise, period, you should be able to walk a quarter mile. And if you can't, you need to go to your doctor and get Ozempic. Say, I need something to help me lose this weight. But Ozempic just don't work by itself. You got to work with it. You got to be Ozempic best friend if you want to lose weight. You know, because I seen some small hippopotamus walking around Chicago. And they had weaves. And some of them had just long, straight hair. But, you know, you got to just work with the program. But as far as being family oriented, they got a lot of things for families, which is kind of cool. Now, a lot of these things now are more what they call time entrance. You get a certain day and a certain time and you got to be there. And if you're not, you just can't go in. I like that because I always show up. Now, some people may not like that, but don't be late. Yeah, just don't be late. You'll be all right if you're not late. And don't get there and give people a hard time because you're late. No, give yourself a hard time, or whoever's with you, slap the hell out of your husband and tell him to shut up. Tell him to shut up. We got to go. Slap him. Because talking to him ain't going to do nothing. He's still going to be talking. You slap him, you'll wake him up. So my whole thing on Chicago is that I enjoy Chicago. They got great food. They wanted more dynamic cities in America as far as things to do. And then even the suburbs, they got things to do. They got a lot of things to do in the suburbs. You know, they got some of these old architects, old writers, all their houses out in the suburb. You know, I mean, you know, they got that. And Chicago has a lot of money. I'm talking about they got a lot of people who are wealthy. But I say that, and when I think about that, if you got somebody wealthy, there's a good chance you got two people who are poor. You got two people who are poor. And, you know, people, I don't know what the economy is based on in Chicago. I really don't know. But I've seen a lot of people in their 40s. They were in their 50s, and they were working in fast food joints. But the one thing about Chicago that's frustrating, every single fast food joint in the suburbs got young kids. I'm talking about, you know, right out of high school. They ain't got no future, no way. Now, in the city, they had college kids. I did recognize that. They had college kids working at most of the restaurants. Suburbs, they had young kids. I'm thinking, okay, that's another loser. That's another loser. Because you can't be 22 years old, and that's the best you can do. That's the best you can do. You are in for a rough life. But Chicago's one of my favorite cities. I'm going back again next year because there's still things I want to do there. And it's one of the places that I just got to pay my $400 a night for a hotel. But that's just me. I'm going to do it. I'm going to enjoy it because Chicago is definitely worth visiting for the 6th time next year. This is the Old School Traveler telling you, check out the video in Chicago. And I might put the link to where my music video in Chicago is going to be. Peace out, the Old School Traveler.